It's the Kink Consultant Podcast, where we're turning up the heat on all things kink and dating, relationships, and pop culture. So close the door, plug in your headphones, and let's get down to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Kink Consultant Podcast. It is my pleasure to welcome on Shelby Devlin. She is a Somatica-certified sex and relationship coach as well. We were both certified through Somatica, so she's a BDSM coach and somatic sex educator with 20 years of experience guiding others through erotic transformation. Welcome, Shelby.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm so happy to be here.
I am delighted to have you here. You will probably not remember the first time we ever were in the same room together, but in coaching classes, you were the person who was brought on to talk about BDSM as a specialty when I was going through my Somatica, I think maybe core and advanced. And I am now a group leader for core, and the same thing, it's funny to do this now because the same thing happens every time. Shelby comes on to teach a class and everyone loses their shit because she is so amazing. I just want to explain for everyone listening, when you do Somatica, it's a training course for sex and relationship coaches, and they do bring Shelby on to talk about BDSM, and I think it just lights people up about this topic, and that's what excites me so much, because I think you introduce it to new audiences all the time through your work, and then coaches have a better ability to work with people who are kinky. And that's my passion, is I just want kink to be accessible to everyone. And you're like the first domino that falls. So that's awesome. Okay. Tell me about how the first domino fell for you.
Honestly, I think the first domino fell when I was playing with my Barbies. Barbies got tied up a whole lot, and I'm not totally sure where this came from. It must have been from some cartoons that I watched, but Barbies would get abducted. They would be, held hostage. There would be like rescue scenarios. Sometimes there would be a little like non-consensual touching of Barbie by the evil Ken doll. And so I think that kind of that power play and like bondage was something that I didn't really know what I was doing, I think, when I was little, but I was like playing with those themes with my dolls. And then around the age of 14, I discovered Anne Rice's Sleeping Beauty series. 14-year-old me, I discovered those books. And for those of you who are not familiar, it is hardcore fantasy BDSM, like pretty intense BDSM.
Otherworldly levels of
BDSM, a lot of consensual non-consent and just non-consent. It's very rich in a lot of BDSM themes. So I read that as a young adolescent and I was like, this is it. This is the jam. And so when I started to explore sexually with my peers, no one knew about those books. No one shared my interests. Like I would kind of like make a small request from one of my boyfriends in high school and they'd either like freeze or shut down. Or my high school boyfriend, my senior year, he's the first person I came out to, and he's about being bisexual. And he's also the first person I came out to really in earnest about being kinky. And he had a meltdown and shamed me and was just so judgmental. And I'm not totally sure how this happened, but I remember I wanted him to pull my hair and he like had a meltdown about it. And while he was going off about it, I was like, you know what? I think something's wrong with you. I don't think anything's wrong with me. And so I kind of just like put a pin in it and then tried to experiment a little bit more after high school. And then nothing really gelled until I moved to San Francisco and I met queer people who were into BDSM. And then I started to explore, and I explored I dated someone who was a spanko. So this person that I dated, they were really into spanking, and I would get spanked for like 45 minutes, but then they were less into orgasm. And so then I was kind of left hanging. I did a lot of experimenting in my early 20s and just tried pretty much everything once just to see if I would like it. So I learned a lot about how people negotiate. I learned a lot about what's out there in BDSM and kink. I learned a lot about what I liked, and I learned a fair bit about what I didn't like. But every experience was valuable. So for several years, I just experimented with partners, and I went to fetish events and like mission control and power exchange and things like that. At about, I think 22 or 23, I started working at Stormy Leather, which is a now defunct fetish boutique in Soma in the Leather District. And so we had all this different types of fetish gear and, sex toys, but we also taught classes in the basement. And I assisted in a lot of those classes. And that's where I started to get more of a formal education in BDSM and kink.
Oh, that's awesome that you got it through that. I got it through like working at a dungeon, but like you got the like real purpose of, hey, this is to educate. And I think there's a slight difference in that.
Yeah, absolutely. The way I learned was personal exploration as
Yeah.
well as like formal training classes. And in more of a dungeon space, there is a formal training, but it's much more to the discretion of the dom you're with at the time. Each dungeon, if they're run by a group of doms or one dom, they have their own way of doing things. Sometimes it can be kind of exploitative, you know, and so it can be a mixed bag when it happens in a bubble.
Just to go back for a second, your Barbie story, first of all, those are like the fantasies I have now, not as a Barbie, but as me, as the Barbie. Do you think you were born this way or exposed?
The answer really is a combination of nature and nurture. I don't think that we're born craving a particular type of sexual exploration, but I do believe that the experiences that we have as a young person shape our personality, how we interact with the world, and our missing experiences. And I think if the stars are aligned and you have the right set of experiences, then you're more likely to be interested in BDSM kink. And so I think that what happened for me as a young person was power was a theme that came up for me early on in my development. And I was also very curious. I stole my dad's Playboys starting at the age of 4. And I don't think that all children are necessarily curious in the same ways. I can't recall anything that was like a direct exposure to BDSM until I read Anne Rice's books. I don't think I saw pornography or my parents doing something kinky or any older person sharing something inappropriate with me. I think it's something that was just kind of innate because power was a theme for me early on.
That's so interesting that you mentioned that. I actually had my mom on the podcast to find out if she knew I was a spanko. So I just asked her directly, like, did you know I was super into spanking? And we talked about how for me, power was a theme and how I just really didn't want to be a kid. I wanted to have the power growing up. And so like I called her Angela because I was like, no, you don't get to be called mom. You don't get some special name. Like we're all equal here. But I think I was born kinky, but to your point, I also say that like I was born with the spanking fetish. That's my opinion. But what I do say is that the relationships I had and the experiences I have are why I look for the specific dynamics I look for. So like similar to what you're saying, it's sort of that exposure. That's the nurture piece for the dynamics I seek out and the play I enjoy.
I think people can get really caught up in the reasons like why. What's the origin story? When was the seed planted? And I think that there's some fun and entertainment and kind of digging through our past experiences and trying to figure out like why we are the way we are. But ultimately, figuring out doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
So whether you're born with it, whether it's learned experience, you know, or experience that develops slowly over time, we like what we like. Right. And I think that's the important thing is figuring out what you like and finding ways to embrace it and have a fulfilling experience no matter what anyone says.
I totally love that answer. And I completely appreciate it because it doesn't make a difference in how I'm experiencing and living it now. It's like, as long as I learn to embrace it and love it, which is something that was part of my personal journey. Like I was not in love with the fact that I needed to seek out spanking until much older. And now it's like the best part of my life. I'm assuming you also moved into an educator role in the store you were working in. Is that correct? Or were you sort of like just working there and assisting and moved on with your career in a different direction? I want to understand that transition.
Right. So I was never teaching classes, but I started giving talks in the basement occasionally, and I was always kind of assisting whoever was instructing. So I felt like I was learning by doing and just taking the class, but also learning by helping. So I didn't get any opportunity at Stormy Leather to start teaching BDSM to anyone.
And what was the transition then, or the time between your working there, but also then taking Somatica, which I don't even know, like Somatica changed. I took it online during COVID period that like, I think I started in 2021. Were you an online student, an in-person student?
I was in person. I think I was one of not the last cohort that was in person, but I was a very large cohort where there was about 100 of us. And it was in person on Treasure Island. How I ended up there was I always kind of flirted with the idea of sex therapy as a profession. And so after I left Stormy Leather, I was working at a cafe and then I got married and I was a housewife for 2 years.
How was that for you? Was that a fulfilling experience for 2 years?
It was the absolute worst. It was not the right thing for me. at all, but sometimes we have to learn things the hard way. And I learned a lot of things about myself the hard way. So I was a housewife for a couple of years, and then my relationship ended, my marriage ended, and I was just kind of picking up the pieces of my life. I had been out of the workforce for actually 5 years, not 2 years. And I was like, what am I going to do with my life? And I kept returning to this idea of therapy and working in relationships and sex. And every program I looked into, I was just like, you can't really be there for someone without touching them. Or how do you teach certain skills with these certain barriers? And then a friend of mine was like, have you heard of Somatica? I was like, no, I haven't. What is this? And then I started researching their website, and I had a phone call with Danielle, and I was like, okay, this is it. This is the thing I've been looking for. This is the path forward. When I was taking the Somatica program, the core training, it was 4 or 5 days once a quarter, spread over a year. And then there were the advanced classes, following years after you did the core training. It was intense. Those 5 days of being in that huge group and doing all the exercises in person. It was just really, it was an emotional crucible.
I mean, that's what Somatica is putting a fist into your body and just sort of grabbing it and shaking a little bit and being like, let's see what's in here. What have you been ignoring? I didn't realize that because when I took it, it was one weekend a month for 6 or 7 months in a row because it was online. That makes so much more sense for people who want to fly in to just do it in a 5-day chunk. It sounds like you had a positive, albeit intense experience with Somatica.
Yeah, it was one of the most transformative experiences of my entire life, probably the most transformative. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about relationships. I could retroactively take a look at all these experiences that I had, and I was like, oh, that's what was going on there, and this is what I could have done differently. I was very lucky to be just kind of ready to start doing the work as soon as I got certified. I also am a massage therapist, and so I was kind of putting those two things together at the beginning of my practice. So doing a lot of trauma body work, connect to their bodies, gain embodiment through Somatica tools and massage therapy tools.
That's such a good mix. I do not have that massage therapy thing, but it's funny you mention it because I'm thinking I really would like to add that in, and just even to have a deeper understanding of the body and where we're holding tension and how we're moving our bodies would be so helpful for even my practice. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I recommend it if you're curious about it.
I definitely am.
I use those skills every day in my practice.
Okay. And you did core and advanced before starting your practice, or did you go straight in?
Yes, I did core and advanced before I started my practice. And then I think 2 or 3 years after I started practicing, I took core again to just brush up and make sure that I was kind of using the tools in the way that they had intended. I just wanted some of some of the teachers and Celeste and Danielle and Dimitri to just watch me doing practice sessions to give me feedback.
Oh, that's amazing. I just went back as a group leader, but I'm learning through that. But yeah, just getting that extra feedback and practicing with people and having someone watch is super helpful. If you've ever thought about doing what I do, becoming a certified sex and relationship coach, this is your sign. The next Somatica certification training starts this month on October 24th, and you can get $750 off your enrollment with code TKC25. Somatic is the world's leading sex and relationship coach training, and getting this certification completely changed my life. It not only helped me become the kink consultant, it's also where I learned to connect deeper, communicate better, and guide people toward pleasure without shame. Let pleasure be your guide on an exciting new career. Sign up today at Somaticainstitute.com and use code TKC25 for $750 off. Jumping ahead slightly, I am going to come back to your practice because I was also lucky enough to do an intensive with you. So for anyone who does Somatica Core, and I was one of them, you can sign up for specific intensives, and one of them is yours in BDSM.
BDSM and kink.
Yes, that was transformative. As someone who has worked in a dungeon, been a professional dominatrix, a professional submissive, a practicing coach, I got so much from that class of hands-on experience, and just the ability to humiliate people went through the roof based on that class. And I'd love to know how. I really think that you took the Somatica tools, but then you also just put your own spin on it and brought BDSM to it. I kind of just want you to talk about your theory and how you applied it and how you mixed the two together, because I was obsessed and I learned so much being sort of adjacent, having specialized in kink after my practice is very kink focused, but then I came to your class and I was like, wow, this is like deep on the psychological side of BDSM too.
One of the things that I love about Somatica is the client arc that they teach. Not only do they teach you all of these tools that you can use in your practice, they demonstrate how you can put these tools together in a comprehensive order so that you help clients build skills and insight at the rate that they need to achieve the goals that they want to achieve. Figuring out diagnostically like what they need to work on to do the thing or have the thing that they want. And so I use that that model that Somatica gives us with BDSM. And I thought about not only my own personal experiences, but like when I've talked to BDSM educators or kink educators about where they get stuck with clients. Like, oh, I wouldn't have done that with him if I had known. That's what he really, he didn't want that. One of my gifts is that I help people feel really safe to be themselves. So in my personal experiences, I've done a lot of weird and kinky shit because I've helped people feel safe enough to tell me about what they want. And so that's kind of where I start with my clients and helping them figure out what they want, what they think they want to experience, and then what is getting in the way of it. And then for a lot of people that want to explore BDSM or kink, there is a certain level of like fear and shame. And so I designed a protocol basically to combat fear and shame while building confidence simultaneously. So that by the time we're doing scenes, people feel excited, to finally dip their toe in, and they're not worried that something is going to go terribly wrong.
Yeah, the worry is also there. The worry of like, I think even coming back from a scene and just feeling embarrassed or shamed, jokingly, that post-nut clarity, like, because I can't really think of like a better description for myself coming out of a scene. But yeah, it's sort of that safe space is everything for people who feel that, in my experience.
Absolutely. And this is something that I really, try to stress to new coaches who want to work with clients around kink is that you need to be prepared for any sort of fallout because you can't predict people's emotional responses to finally getting the thing that they've been craving. So making a plan for that of like, if this, then this really helps not only like maintain the container for BDSM, but it maintains the coaching container, and it also helps the coaches feel prepared to deal with these dark, scary themes.
And they can be kind of dark because they are someone's innermost thinkings and they're bringing them out. And sometimes they even just seem dark because we've never heard them before. But once you process what it is, it's like, oh yeah, that totally tracks. I totally get where you're coming from and what that is.
Right. Yeah. The connecting with someone around our dark desires, they are no longer are scary because they're not mysterious anymore.
Yeah. Demystifying it is part of it, I think. Just like, I like to describe it as like pulling it out to the forefront. Like I enjoy scenes with themes of jealousy or shaming. I enjoy being shamed because I feel I put that on myself and I hold it in. And if we can pull that out into the light and play with it, I feel less scared of it or more empowered by it. That's where all the fun is. For me, that's where my fun is. Have you found that being a coach and doing this work has changed how you enjoy BDSM as a self-practitioner and in your own relationships and how you connect with people?
I think it certainly has. I think that guiding people through BDSM professionally has helped me be a better communicator personally. And it's definitely given me a lot more practice so I can take people right to the edge so much faster and so much easier. And I also have this like wellspring of ideas, of all these things that I've done because I've been with, I've worked with so many different types of people. Now I have this massive list in my head that I can pull out at any time and just dazzle someone. So it makes me feel like I have, a superpower for sure.
Oh, you definitely do. So like one thing that I took away from your class was your ability to populate a menu like that for someone. If they gave you one small thing, you were like, let me get my laundry list out and like unroll like, those like old parchments of like, what do you want on the list here? I loved that because I was like, oh my gosh, you just went in 13 different directions at one time and
Mhm.
opened up someone's world.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you got to witness that. And that's definitely how I feel when I am working with someone new, or if I have a new lover. I can ask the right questions in the right order and get exactly what I need to just dazzle them. It feels magical when you witness it from the outside or when you're experiencing it for the first time. But it honestly, it comes from just, 20 years of dedication and practice. That's what mastery looks like, where someone could say like, oh, I'm gonna like being spanked and choked, and it wouldn't be so bad if you called me a good girl. And I'm like, oh great, these
Yeah.
are 10 things that we're gonna do today, right?
And it is sort of like watching a master chef or something, just put all the pieces together. And I've gotten that feedback because obviously I know other people who have gone and done the course since I went to your mastery class, and I've heard different stories and they're fascinating of like, I mean, especially when someone wants something, what I consider a little bit nebulous. And that's what I think is so impressive, where they're like, well, I like humiliation. And then you'll ask like a further question to clarify. And then I see you go in and you're like, okay, let me parse this out in my head. And then you come back and you're like, and scene, it's impressive.
Thank you.
Are you ever stumped anymore? When do people still bring you new things?
I mean, I'm very rarely surprised by something. And I'm excited when I am surprised because I love to learn. Novelty is inherently exciting. So it is rare when I am surprised. But as far as being stumped, not anymore. Here's a caveat. If I feel stumped, it's because someone either is not being honest with me, or they don't actually want what they keep saying they want. I have a client that I've been working with for about 2 years, and we were getting into some really heavy humiliation, degradation scenes. And afterwards, he was just a mess, and he just would have this horrible shame over. And I was just like, this is not working. You feeling bad afterwards is a sign that it's not working. And so at first, you have to kind of go along with what the client wants within reason, within your
Yeah.
boundaries, and with the mandate of not doing any harm. But you have to kind of go with what the client wants at first, so you build some like trust and safety, right? And pull on that thread a little bit. And then one day I was like, look, I hear what you're telling me what you want, and we've been doing what you want. Now I'm going to give you something completely different, and let's see what it feels like. And at this point, we had enough trust, and he knew that I understood what he wanted, and he knew, he could call his safe words. So we were golden. So I did a completely different scene in which he was only getting praise, and all the punishment was a way for me to be delighted by him. And after that scene, there was all the tears, and it was like, oh my gosh, it felt so different. It was amazing. There was no shame over. There was no guilt. He was excited about our next session. I was like, okay, what's happening here is that feeling you have felt like you've needed punishment after every time you masturbate or explore kink. And so punishment has been connected to your turn on, because you punish yourself after you get something that feels good. So now you don't need to be punished anymore. So we took that ending out so you could just have a fulfillment. And so that's an example of like me kind of getting stuck, but I trusted that something wasn't right. It didn't feel right to me, and trusting my instincts is a big part of why I'm so successful at guiding people through this process.
And it is so much about instincts, and that helped you. It sounds like you rewrote his narrative for him, or like worked with him to rewrite his narrative.
Yeah, we're still working on it. I can say happily that after our sessions together, there isn't a shame over anymore. There's no longer the guilt and the difficult feelings and the worry that I'm going to reject him because of what we did in a BDSM scene.
Wow, it's so beautiful that you were able to take him to that point where like that's where the true enjoyment is then, when you learn to accept it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my listeners are new to kink or just interested in exploring it. Do you have any advice for newbies or for people who aren't so experienced with scene creation but are dying to get their hands on it and try new things?
Yes, if I had to like kind of whittle it down or distill it down to a couple of like key points, one piece of advice is to go slowly. People go too fast. They go too intense, or they move too fast in a scene. And only when we move slowly can we actually physically feel, but emotionally feel what we're experiencing. When we get anxious or when we get really excited and turned on, we speed up. And that speed up, especially in the beginning, makes us bypass the experience completely, and we're more likely to get injured or cross a boundary or kind of miss a cue, if we're speeding up. So my advice to people when you're first starting out is pick one thing to explore at a time and really lean into it, savor it, explore this one thing. Let's use spanking as an example. The first time you spank someone, go slowly, build up momentum, build up eroticism, take your time. You don't have to spank someone as hard as you can for like 3 minutes and then your hand hurts and you can't do it anymore. That's not hot,
No.
right? You can do a whole scene of just a slow, seductive spanking with like a lot of teasing.
Oh, absolutely. And it feels, as a lifelong spanko, it feels just as good to have that, like, that
Right.
teasing, that ebb and flow. Oh, getting turned on right now, especially by the word savor, right?
Savor.
Because that takes it away from just being, well, you're in learning period right now. No, you're in savoring period. So just
Yes,
really
exactly.
lean in.
Yeah, because BDSM is first and foremost about pleasure.
It absolutely is.
That's
Oh,
what we're doing here. And sometimes pain is pleasurable, sometimes degradation is pleasurable or humiliation, sometimes being locked in a tiny box is pleasurable, right? There's so many different ways that we can explore pleasure, but we're not going to feel any pleasure if we're moving too fast.
no. In fact, it's all the other negative things you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
just areas that it's kind of like
Hmm.
stepping on a landmine or something. So
Right.
you take your time, you navigate.
The other piece of advice that I have that I think is so important is understanding that a good submissive is not supposed to do everything their dominant wants them to do. That is not what dominance and submission is. If there isn't a negotiation and consent and whatever the dominant plans for the submissive is in service to the submissive's pleasure, then it isn't really BDSM, right? So a lot of
Yeah.
people get stuck exploring BDSM or power dynamics, and the dominant says, like, you have to do this because I'm the dominant and you're the submissive. And that's just an abusive relationship. That's not a fun, sexy game.
Oh, 100%. I always say without negotiation and consent, you're just being a dick. Yeah.
Right, but even in negotiation, I think people don't really understand that just because your dominant wants something doesn't mean you have to give it to them. And if they pressure you into it, or if they tell you that the scene isn't going to be hot for them, if this element isn't part of it, then you're not operating with a dominant, you're operating with a selfish lover,
Ooh, yeah.
which is a crime.
It is an absolute crime. No one wants a selfish lover who's
Yeah,
not like having those conversations and
right.
being in it for each other. You did say something, it's not dominance or submission. Do you have easy, clear and cut definitions of what dominance and submission is?
Dominance and submission is consensual role play with power dynamics. And so dominance is being a leader in a sexual encounter, and submission is surrendering to an experience.
That's so beautifully put. I have never put submission as surrendering to an experience, but you're 100% correct. And it's poetic. Yeah.
Thank you. I just made it up.
Yeah, no, I like it a lot because I describe myself even as an experience junkie, both on the dom and sub side, but surrendering to an experience really is what submission is. Question two. You described the arc of a scene. For newbies who are interested in creating scenes or delving into this and they don't feel they've done it before, do you have any advice on scene creation or how to make it fun and safe?
So after you've done negotiation, boundaries, safe words, you get all the consent, have a plan for aftercare, you just take, you create what I like to call an erotic menu, which is this, a Somatica, tool. You create an erotic menu of like, a list of like 5 to 10 things that you both want to explore that you both will enjoy. And then the dominant will take 3 or 4 of those menu items and think about what they want to do in what order and how you're going to transition from A to B to C to D. And that's your scene. That's it. If you do 10 things in a scene and you're a new player, you're going to get overwhelmed. You're going to go too fast and you're going to fumble. If you're just starting out, choose 3 things that you want to do. I want to use leather restraints and give a spanking and force blowjob. That's a great scene, right?
Yeah.
What order do you want that to go in? How are you going to transition between those 3 things? How do you want it to end? That's enough. It doesn't take hours to plan that scene. And it shouldn't take you hours to plan a scene when you're just starting out. Leave that later on, once you've built up enough skills and you have enough knowledge of your partner, then you can make more elaborate plans.
Completely. And if I can just add, if you have a plan of 4 things and you only get to 2, it's not a failure of a scene. Like,
Yes, totally.
you're in the moment. As long as you're both enjoying yourselves, each other, that's a successful scene.
Yeah, absolutely. That happens to me all the time. I'll have like 3 or 4 things that I want to do with a client, and then we'll get into it. I'm like, oh no, 2 is enough. We're not moving on from this. This is where we are, Or I get to the 3rd thing and it's not great. And so I go back to the 2nd thing. I'm like, okay, we're just going to erase that 3rd thing, back to what works.
The amount of stuff that is true in BDSM and is also just true in life, like if things get a little complex and it's not working, go back to the last thing that worked and then see if you want to go in a different direction or
yes, slow down, pause, back up, don't speed up, don't do more.
No, I'm always entertained by how it's like, oh no, BDSM is just like life, vice versa. Just go back to what worked. It's a good plan. That is super helpful. This is possibly one of the most common questions I get, most popular questions I get on a weekly basis. How do I tell my partner I'm into this? And like insert whatever, like kink is what they mean. I don't often get specifics. What is your advice to people who ask that very common question?
My advice is to choose one thing that you want to do, one thing you want to explore with your partner, and you initiate a conversation like you're inviting them to something fun. Because the energy that we bring to those disclosure conversations is contagious. So if I come up to you, Amanda, and I'm like, I really want you to pull my hair, and I'm pouting about it, and I feel like it's a weird thing to ask, and you're going to say no, you're going to be on guard as soon as I walk up to you, right?
It's true, because I love pulling hair, and I was like, I don't know if I want to pull her hair right now with that energy. You're right.
Right.
Yeah.
But if I sit down next to you on the couch and I put my arm around you and I'm like, I would love for you to pull my hair tonight. Are you into that?
I think I'd be into anything if you said it in that tone of voice. So yes.
Yeah. If you think it's going to be fun, show them that you think it's going to be fun. Right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, what do you think about tying me up? Would that be fun? Let's do a fun thing. Let's do something weird. Let's go crazy.
You're 100% right. Even you saying that reminds me of like an ex who one day came home. He was like, what would be really fun if we went to bed early tonight? And he had me so stoked up on, and he was very serious about this going to bed early thing. Yeah. I knew that whatever he was going to say, I was on the hook there. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's try it. Talk about going wild.
So once you invite them to do something fun, don't take it seriously. If it's the first time you're doing something together, it's not going to be perfect. Give yourself permission to laugh and smile and be like, oh, it's okay, try again. Make the stakes lower so that they're more likely to feel comfortable during the experience and more willing to try again to work towards perfection or like satisfying that fantasy. If it's pass fail, then you're most likely going to fail.
Oh, it's so true. 100%. Again, love how you put that because it's such a simple way of explaining it. I'm going to speak for myself as a submissive who made the mistakes early on. I was so obsessed with my own fantasy that I forgot to take myself out of it and realize, one, I'm dealing with another person and I've been obsessing over this for 15 years or 10 years. They haven't. So this is all new to them and I need to bring grace to this and like let them mess up, let me mess up, It doesn't need to be word perfect or I've built a fantasy for 15 years. Let's just realize that's a fantasy and now I'm getting to be excited and live the reality, even if it doesn't match up.
That reminds me, I had this client, Amanda, and he had very rigid fantasies, and they were very complicated. It involved a lot of gear, but it also involved a 30-minute script that he sent to me like 20 minutes before our session started. And he's like, these are the things I want you to say. And I was like, dude, well, this is our whole session is talking about this script.
Yeah.
Like, how do I fucking memorize this in 20 minutes? Can I read it, while we're in our scene? And I kind of pointed out, I am going to fail. I'm set up to fail today. And he's like, what, you don't want to do it? And I'm like, that's not what I said. It's like, I can't. I literally can't memorize this. I can't do what you want to do because I haven't had time to prepare.
I love that he did have a script, though, not going to lie.
The script. Girl, the script.
Was it medical by any chance?
No, it was not medical. But he could have been into that. But no, it was not medical. We didn't do any medical play.
I had a client when I worked at the dungeon, and the only reason he chose me, I don't think I was his body type. I don't think he was his anything. And like, there's a lot of diversity in what people are into. I'm totally down with that. But one day he told me, he was like, I pick you because you memorize the script the best. And it was the same script every week. But yes, I learned it over time, not in 20 minutes. Those are like my favorite examples, though, of just sort of like you're being met with someone who is, they're so specific.
So specific. Yeah.
I love specificity in this because I always find it interesting. I'm like, my brain
Absolutely.
zeroes in. I'm like, oh, tell me more about why the rubber glove is an important part of this scene.
Right.
From what I understand and just following you a little bit, you've taken this work, but you've moved past it. You've taken your knowledge of BDSM and taken it out into the real world to help people not just explore their own fantasies, but you are an expert witness.
I'm an expert witness for criminal cases involving BDSM. So what that means is that if someone uses BDSM as a defense, so I'm hired to educate the district attorneys that are working on the case, like answer their questions about BDSM, or the detectives that are working on the case, because they're most of the time they're not BDSM experts, right? So they have a lot of questions and curiosity, and they're like, is this a crime? In most cases, I go through the evidence and then I write a report and give my professional opinion about like what is BDSM and what is not BDSM. And then in some cases, I also testify in front of the jury. So they get to hear about BDSM from an expert as well.
Which is an amazing thing to be able to do. If you are testifying in front of a jury, are you thrown questions that you haven't been prepared for or just sort of like asked your opinion? I know you do the research, but like, are there sort of on the spot aha moments like you'd see in a TV show, or is it a fairly prepared situation?
It can go either way.
Wow, that is intense.
Yeah.
Talk about scene preparation and planning, and then you're sort of just thrown into a very real life scenario with very real consequences.
Yes, absolutely. Thankfully, I have a lot of experience with public speaking, so it hasn't been too challenging. But I have to say, the first time I walked into a courtroom and like sat in my little seat with the microphone, I was like, oh, this is really intense. This is a whole new thing that I'm doing.
I am slightly familiar from just following celebrity cases of where BDSM is used as the reason something happened. Are you ever challenged by a different expert that's brought in to say something different to you? Or when you're brought in, are you the foremost expert and they don't bring in multiple people?
Usually, if the defense hires an expert, then the prosecution will find their own expert. And that's really common in any sort of criminal cases. If one side hires an expert witness, they'll usually hire someone else as a rebuttal. So there is another BDSM expert witness that has been doing this work for decades. And I've worked on opposing sides of several cases as this person.
That sounds like really fulfilling work, to be able to put all of your knowledge to a real life application that can make a difference in someone's life.
It is really fulfilling, and it's such a surprise. I stumbled into it. I never in a million years could have imagined that this is where my career was going to take me, but I've been really enjoying it for the past several years, and I've worked on some really interesting cases, and I do feel like I'm well suited to do this type of work. It's very important. And the cases that are coming up right now are setting a precedent legally for what consensual BDSM looks like. And I want to be part of that conversation.
Wow, that is extremely powerful and something I didn't even think about. The fact that it is so new, this does set precedent. Okay. Thank you for sharing. So you've had a wealth of experience. What is next for Shelby Devlin?
Well, I wrote a book about BDSM. It's basically an introduction to BDSM for people that are new to exploration or they want to enrich their experience. It's also a great resource for coaches and therapists that want to have like a good reference, give their clients. But basically what's laid out in this book is the protocol that I use to teach my clients and to teach coaches how to work with people around BDSM and kink. And the title of the book is The Pleasure Protocol.
I am so excited that this is going to be in the world. You have done a good thing, Shelby. I am so excited to read it. How long was the process to write this?
I wrote the first manuscript in 6 weeks.
holy shit. That kind of tracks for you, to be quite honest. I'm like,
Yes,
of course she did.
that's classic me. It's classic
Yes.
me. And then I took about 2 months to edit it, and then I gave it to my agent, and we just got signed with 10 Speed. So
Congratulations. Selfishly, I went straight to how excited I was that this book is going to be there, but that's an amazing achievement. I am so happy for you and the kink community as a whole.
Nobody was writing something like it. And I mean, the closest comparison is S&M 101, but that book was written in the 90s and it doesn't have accurate information anymore. It is outdated.
You're right. SM 101 is the first kink book I read, like how to self-help, I guess is how it's technically described. You're right. It is old AF. I still reference it, but even I'm like, okay, this is not enough anymore. Right. The world has changed. It's not this hidden thing. Like literally, I'm on Instagram and TikTok talking about it. There are plenty of other people who aren't even certified on talking about it. So to have something like this is going to be really important. And also, Shelby, before this, the only access we had to your knowledge was to hire you as a coach, which I still highly recommend. You will never have a session like a Shelby Devlin session if you are interested in BDSM, or to sign up for Somatica, which also I still highly recommend. But I'm really glad this is going to be accessible for everyone. When can we expect this book to be published?
The end of 2026, so the end of next year. I know it's heartbreaking. It guts me every time I have to tell someone that. This process is so slow and it's frustrating. Well, I'm hoping that I can come back and talk to you all about it once I can actually hold it in my hand.
Of course, we're going to have you back on. I cannot wait to read the book. Again, congratulations. This is huge. And as someone who has a bookshelf full of like possibly every BDSM book written, and so many of them are from the 90s, I am so excited to add your book to that shelf.
Thank you.
Shelby, again, thank you so much. You are doing amazing work. And for anyone who wants to find Shelby, you can find her on Instagram as Coach Shelby Devlin or at her website, shelbydevlin.com. Thank you so much, Shelby. And I cannot wait to have you on again next year when the book is published and ready to go.
Thank you, Amanda.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it interesting. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Email info@thekinkconsultant.com. Until next time, keep on kinking on.